Between the years of 1609 and 1619, Johannes Kepler published his 3 laws of planetary motion. To grossly simplify, they describe how an elliptical path is formed by bodies orbiting the sun. This sun-centric perception of the universe was a big point of controversy at the time, as the widely accepted yet incorrect perception of the solar system, known as geocentric, was far more appealing. The basis of the geocentric model revolved around the idea that everything revolved around the Earth. The reason that the geocentric model was so widely supported was because it was backed by religion, and anything that spoke out against religion, and any of it being untruthful, was considered blasphemous and therefore illegal. While many of Kepler's peers bought into the false premise of geocentrism, Kepler rejected it, instead focusing his work on heliocentric models. Coming back to the planetary laws of motion that he created, people found out that these also seemed to apply to satellites and other orbiting objects. And after studying planetary motion and rocket science, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, responsible for his famous rocket equation, wrote in one of his many papers, specifically Exploration of Outer Space by Means of Rocket Devices, about the possibility of a sort of low Earth orbit if the minimum speed of 8,000 meters per second can be achieved, and if the lowest point of the orbit, or periapsis, is at an altitude above the Kármán line, or generally agreed upon altitude that the atmosphere ends. After this was published, scientific minds started realizing the possibility of artificial satellites as an achievable goal, rather than a pipe dream. It was a man named Sergei Korolev, a rocket engineer and scientist, who proposed the launch of an artificial satellite to the Minister of Defense Industry, Dmitry Ustinov, forwarding papers from Mikhail Tikhonravov, another follower of Tsiolkovsky's dreams of spaceflight. After reviewing it carefully, and for almost a year, in 1955, after Dwight Eisenhower announced that the US would attempt a launch at a small satellite into orbit, Leonid Sedov followed up on this announcement with one of his own, delivering the news that the USSR would attempt the same challenge. Skipping forward in time a bit, and against the odds, the USSR actually launched the first artificial satellite into Earth orbit with Sputnik 1, starting the space race and solidifying Russia as a symbol of relentless dedication to the mastery and exploration of spaceflight. This being said, orbit isn't as simple as most movies or TV shows make it out to be. You can't just leave the atmosphere and stay in space. Multiple requirements must be met, and I think I've already told you 2 of them. Now, obviously, it's the height. You do have to exit the atmosphere in order to retain orbit, but the second one, which I think I've also mentioned, is the speed. In order to obtain a low Earth orbit, you have to be moving at speeds around 8,000 meters per second relative to Earth. Now, this speed can actually vary depending on the altitude. As the higher you go, the lower the orbital speed requirement is. The 2 examples that I'll be using are Apollo 11 in its low parking orbit and a satellite in geostationary orbit. Now, when Apollo 11 was in this parking orbit, roughly 200 kilometers up, they were moving at speeds around 8,100 meters per second. In the case of our geostationary satellite, however, which is 36,000 kilometers high, it will only be moving at around 3,000 meters per second. Despite this, both of them are in stable orbits. Okay, so we understand that you need to be moving pretty quickly in order to get into orbit, but why? Now, I think the best example that I've heard, at least so far, is with a really delicate piece of string and a ping pong ball attached to the end of it. Now, if you hold the string and start spinning around, the ball will follow, and it'll lift off the ground, and you will have a simulated orbit. However, if you swing too quickly and the ball goes too fast, the string will break off, and it will escape your gravity. Well, I mean, like, finger quotes gravity. It's obviously not an accurate depiction, but it gets the point I need across. You need to be moving at a specific speed and distance relative to you in order to overcome your gravity. Now, let's go back to that part where if you go too quickly, then the string breaks and the ball keeps going. So, this type of orbit is known as a hyperbolic or parabolic orbit, aka an escape trajectory. This just means that your ball, your satellite, whatever, is going fast enough to escape your gravitational pull and will eventually completely escape your gravitational influence. Now, the reason that these orbits are called hyperbolic and parabolic is because the path that they form while moving past planet is a hyperbola or a parabola, as long as the velocity is not changed by any external forces. External forces could be any drag caused by an atmosphere or any type of collision or even just firing your rockets. That would change the path of your orbit and make it not a parabola or hyperbola. Now, these types of orbits, hyperbolic and parabolic, can actually be used for a maneuver called a gravity assist. Now, a gravity assist is pretty complex, at least as an equation, but when defined as a concept, they're pretty easy to understand. Okay, but what even is a gravity assist? A gravity assist is a maneuver used in order to gain velocity by entering and exiting a gravitational body's gravity, and it does so in a path that actually allows you to steal the momentum of whatever planet you're gravity assisting off of. Now, this maneuver has been done a lot of times by a lot of different satellites, but I think that the most notable examples are Voyager 1 and 2. These are two satellites that now get to explore interstellar space, or outside of our sun's gravitational body space, and they did so by gaining a lot of velocity in order to escape the sun's huge gravity well. You need a lot of speed in order to get out of there, and the way that they did that, at least for Voyager 1, was by first assisting off of Jupiter and then Saturn. These are two bodies with huge amounts of gravity, which means that they could steal a lot of speed and escape the solar system. Now, Voyager 1 is cool, but in my opinion, Voyager 2 is a lot cooler, because they didn't just fly by 2 bodies, they flew by 4. They went by Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, gaining speed from each assist and eventually escaping the solar system at approximately 15.9 kilometers per second. Now, there are a lot of other satellites that did a lot of cool assists. New Horizons did a flyby of Jupiter and Pluto, taking pictures of Pluto and Arrokoth with fidelity that we could only imagine getting with telescopes. Cassini-Huygens used 2 Venus flybys, an Earth flyby, and a Jupiter flyby in order to get to Saturn and Titan, which, if you didn't know, is one of Saturn's moons. And a lot of notable examples with other satellites are available to look up, but I'm not going to name all of them because that would take far too long. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my brief history of satellites, and thanks for watching.